Welcome to Get Better Basketball Live. I'm Coach DeMarco, and today my guest is Cassie Lastivka, assistant basketball coach at Wilmington College. We're going to dive into one of my favorite topics, player development. But before we do, make sure you hit that like button down below, turn on your notifications, and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more great content each and every week. Another Get Better Basketball Live is up now. Coach DeMarco here with Get Better Basketball Live. Today, my guest is Coach Cassie Lastivka from Wilmington College, assistant basketball coach there. Thanks for joining me, Coach.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're going to dive into one of my favorite topics, which is player development. And I know it's something that you work with as well. And I just want to ask you kind of a broad question to get started, which is, what do you feel like the keys are to player development and to successfully implementing any type of player development program, or even just individually with a player?
I think the one more important key is, they're players instead of pawns, right? And it's really teaching them how to play the game of basketball. So, for example, we were off Monday, so we had practice, not really practice, kind of more of a walkthrough review today. Before that, I had one of our seniors in the gym, and I typically work her out after practices, more so shooting, but with her development, it's been getting a lot of shots up within our offense. And, we're starting to see a little bit more zone now. So it was getting her looks within our zone offense. That way, when it comes onto that 5-on-5 type stuff, it's natural for her. And I think that was always a big thing when I started getting into like training players individually, was looking at, okay, offensively, what do we do? And then how can we rep that to where come game time, you've already done it before. So I think it's implementing some type of offensive reads to where, they're getting either different looks off, whether it's shooting or pocket passing or any type of thing. It's not just, getting shots up, but being able to make reads within the offense, developing their skills further, because you can run the best offense possible, but if your players don't know how to pass, catch, or shoot, it doesn't work like that. So, being able to implement those type of stuff.
Yeah, you're bringing up an important topic here with player development, sort of that it's not one size fits all, and you're looking at sort of what they need in the upcoming games. You mentioned zone offense as one example, but I want to ask too, how do you assess, you working with a team of players, and I know you mentioned a specific player you're working with as well within the team, but how do you assess what they need, and what the players need to work on? I know there's, hey, we're going to see some zones coming up and we might work on skills that will help with that. But just the bigger picture, how do you assess their skills that they have and what they need to improve on?
So for me personally, we started off in the fall by watching film, and I'd had an individual film session with each player, looking at their strengths and their weaknesses, and we honed more on their strengths, especially with a lot of the upperclassmen, especially at the college level too. That's their natural ability. I'm not going to try to add something to their game that they're not going to be capable of doing or that will make them uncomfortable. I'd rather expand on what they're really good at. Now, we might add a few things here and there that are small, but again, it's more so expanding their strengths. And then especially with our underclassmen, we only had 4 freshmen, so kind of looking at their high school film and being like, okay, what can we really work on to make you a better collegiate player? So for me, it was starting off in the fall, watching and breaking down film, different game-like scenarios. And then, okay, we have a player who pretty decent outside shooter, but that's not her game. She's more of a slasher, attacker, can finish around the rim. Okay, what kind of pivot moves can we make when you get stopped? Because she's starting to see double teams now. All right. So how do we expand your finishing game? We don't really, you have a decent outside shot, so we're not going to try to rep that a ton. We're going to try to hone in on your strengths a little bit more.
How much are the players, I know you mentioned watching film with them and looking at even the freshmen, looking at their high school game and seeing what they're bringing to the table at the college level, and how much of the players part of that development process and their input and their feedback, and what does that look like? How do you interact with them and work with them based on sort of what they feel they need and also what you're assessing that they might need to be successful at the college level?
Right. So like our film sessions, I don't like to do all the talking, which I think most coaches are like that too. Like we don't want to be the only voice in there. So I'll ask a lot of questions. I'll pause videos. I'll be like, okay, what do you see before I give my answer? Because I want to see what they see. That way I can kind of give them my input and then we try to get on the same page. So, there's occasions where I have a kid who is struggling sometimes with the confidence of shooting. I'll pause it and be like, okay, why is that a good shot right now? Give me your feedback and then I'll tell you what I see. And then that way we're communicating on the same page. It's not they have one thought process and then I have my other and they're like, okay, I have no idea what you're saying. I want them to teach me first. And then I'm going to be able to teach them kind of how my assessment's going and why I think this would be better for them. But I kind of want them to give me their why before I give them my why.
Yeah, and what does the breakdown look like? I know there's, sort of those individual skills that you're working on. And then you're also kind of talking about the player development aspect of like looking at film and sort of decision making and things that are happening in games. So could you just talk about your role in terms of managing like we want, these skills, are you going to improve on shooting or passing, but then also that other aspect of it, which is, playing, you're playing against the 2-3 zone and there's the development aspects to that when you're managing players within your program. So what does that look like for you and how do you kind of manage both of those aspects of player development?
So we've done it on an individual basis, but also kind of like a small group. We actually had a film session, I think 2 weeks ago, where I had the perimeter players. And so I actually clipped film of our offense. We do a dribble drive offense. So I clipped film and basically would pause it in certain situations, be like, okay, where are our rotations in this? We drive baseline. Who is supposed to be in the backside corner? Who's supposed to be drifting? Because sometimes our rotations weren't there. So I paused it and I told him, okay, where are we supposed to be out on the floor? And, I had different voices giving me what they were looking at because sometimes when they're out on the court on practice, they don't see kind of what we're seeing. So being able to see that in film and be like, oh, now I know what coach is saying in this situation, or oh, now I see it in that game-like view of we were supposed to be there. That's why that wasn't open. Or our spacing's off because our rotations aren't there. So we've broken it down kind of in small groups to where we also had the post players too in a small group. We had the point guards in their own group. That way they could kind of see it from their perspective of their position. We've done larger, like a whole team, but I think being able to break it down by their positions and having similar voices and similar game abilities like themselves helped a little bit better.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the fact that you're kind of getting into the IQ aspect of it. There's the skill development, but then that IQ piece is really big as well. So, but I do want to ask in terms of the skills, and we see a lot of, player development is kind of taken on a life of its own, within a program like you're describing, but also, these player development specialists who are, outside of a specific program. And I do some of that myself. And I'm always curious to ask the breakdown of what you do with players skill wise. And I guess we'll start offensively. I want to come back to defense in a minute, but just thinking offensively, shooting, passing, dribbling, decision making, whatever it might be. What does that look like when you're working with a player? When you describe the player maybe after practice or before practice, what's that breakdown look like for you? And I'm sure it might vary from player to player, but just curious of a general idea.
Yeah, so for like a couple examples, before I came to Wilmington, I was a high school basketball coach. And over the summer, when I resigned from my position, I was actually training one of my former high school players who's now playing at a Division I school here in Ohio. I broke out down our workouts. We did ball handling first. It was two ball stationary. It was on the move, just getting a little bit of warm up in, but also working on tight handles. And then we went to finishing and we were working on various finishes around the rim, also in transition because the school she was going to play for liked to play in transition. So I wanted to incorporate that. And then we got just your simple around the horn type, just reps up before we went into reading off pick and roll type actions because the previous offense in the previous year at the school that she was going to did a lot of pick and roll. I wasn't sure if they were going to incorporate that this year or not, but I at least wanted her to get comfortable with making different reads. So we did like side PNRs, high pick and rolls, reading off of if a defender hedges or they blitz it or they, ice it. What are going to be your reads? How are you going to be able to, whether you're finishing around the rim or shooting? So I broke it down more as ball handling, finishing, and then shooting. And then I broke down the shooting as more of just your typical shooting around spots and then read shooting within an offense.
Yeah, and you keep coming back to how you kind of individualize it for the player and even the team they're going to be playing for, the transition game, the pick and roll game, and really thinking about what they need. And I want to ask, because I feel like even I struggle with this sometimes, that balance between sort of some of the skills or things that I tend to do. I'll give you an example here in a second. And then also what the players will need in the schools they go to, if they need that pick and roll game or whatever they're going to be working on within their position. But, an example for me is I tend to be more of a permanent pivot foot type of person, just one pivot foot. That goes back to, Michael Jordan was that type of guy. Of course, I grew up in Boston watching Paul Pierce, and he was not a permanent pivot foot. He often played off the opposite pivot a lot. So I know there's so many philosophies on that, but that's something I've always kind of done. And then as I've worked with players in college, sometimes their coaches want them to work off of both pivots. So I've had to adjust. So just curious, like what that's been like for you, outside when you're working with players like this one who goes to a Division I college and balancing out sort of what you prefer with what they might need when they go to a different school.
Correct. I knew like when the school she was going to was probably going to expand on what we were already teaching and probably even make it 10 times better than what we were doing. We were kind of more so just repping it. My biggest thing is I think you're right. It is a struggle because I don't want to teach a player something and then they go to college and all of a sudden that's not what they want. So I try to keep it as, I just want to say basic, but as simple as I can. And not try to get too over the top to where, she was already a talented enough player. She had the skill set, she had the IQ. It was more so, let's just get a lot of reps up, create it naturally. So then you have the confidence when you go in with these players that are playing at a high level already, that you're comfortable with where you're at. You're not timid or you're not playing hesitant because you don't know how to make certain reads. So for me, it was just trying to keep it as simple as possible, but while also trying to rep different scenarios for her.
Yeah, well, she's fortunate to have you working with her. I like, everything you're saying seems, spot on in terms of player development. So many great points already. And I want to ask about defense. I know this, sometimes you watch, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it might be, and you see player development and it's, a lot of stuff, there's great stuff out there, shooting workouts and everything. Not a lot of defense out there. And I just wanted to get your perspective through both lenses. So, as a college coach, when you're doing that individual player development, how much of a focus on the defensive side of the ball? And then when you're doing it outside of, your college job, when you're training players who might be going to different schools and whatnot, how much emphasis on defense do you typically do?
So for right now where we're at, we're lucky enough before our practice, like before we actually start kind of more like the whole team type practice, we begin our practices with warm-up stations. And a lot of times we actually have one of those stations be defense. And we are working on in small groups the type of closeouts we want, where we want to shade the ball. If this upcoming, so luckily for us, we play back to back Friday and Saturday, the same team. So we kind of have a week to prepare for that same opponent. So if we're trying to make defensive adjustments, we'll actually utilize that in our warm-up station before we actually put it into like small games or 5-on-5. So we're like, okay, this is how, if we're going to go over ball screens, working on that technique, or if we're going to ice ball screens, working on that technique. Again, allowing them to kind of get a feel for it before we throw them to the wolves when we do 5-on-5 and they have no idea what they're doing. So luckily for us, we break down our practices with warm-up stations to begin with, and we'll incorporate various defensive movements within that warm-up station. Individually, outside of basketball, I don't try to teach shading a certain way or anything like that because I don't know what they're going into. It's more so getting into a defensive stance, making sure that we're not flat footed. We're able to move our hips at a certain angle. We're not, for me personally, I'm all about angles, even on the offensive side, whether it's ball screens or anything like that. So my same thing is with defense as well. You open up your hips too much, you're giving up a straight line drive. So how is your reach step? How are you cutting off the ball? In those situations as well. So I try to look at, again, try to keep it simple, nothing too over the top. If it's just me and another player, again, I'm not as young as I used to be, but at least try to do a little one on and make it a little live like so they at least can get that technique down. If it's a small group, then absolutely we'll have people go one on one or two on two working on different scenarios.
Thinking about your role with your college team, I'm interested to ask. We talked about assessing players sort of as they come in and what they might need, and what does that look like throughout the season as that assessment process? And are you revisiting and meeting with them throughout the season and looking at film and saying, we seem to be making progress in this area, but we want to hone in our focus more on this. So what does that process look like throughout the season?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we will meet with players. I know we had, I think, a meeting 2 weeks ago when we kind of met like the halfway point of our season and had individual meetings with them about their roles, if where they saw themselves at. Did they think they were growing? Were they still accepting of their role? How did they want to improve? Kind of where we saw them as well and what the improvements we've seen, and also hear what we need to work on. So we try to hit that at the halfway point and then continue that through. Film, I leave that up to the players. I don't want to force someone to have to come see me, because then it's just they're not going to get the most out of it. I rather them be like, "Hey, coach, do you have time to come in or anything like that?" And I did that with one of our other players who had a rough shooting day the last two games. I thought her confidence might have been down a little bit, so I showed her a clip that I saw that she made a three in transition with someone in her face. So I'm like, "Hey, don't ever tell me that you can't shoot with someone contesting your shot." And she gave me a little feedback about, what she thought was a good shot and whatnot. I'm like, "Hey, why don't we watch film? Show me what you see, and then I'll show you what I see, and then we'll get on the same page." So, she came to my office, we watched film together, and we got on the same page. So again, I'll leave that up to the players, but we'll have individual meetings with them at points in the season just to talk about their role again, kind of reemphasize that, but also tell them, "Hey, this is where you've grown so far since the beginning of, this COVID season where we couldn't make contact and all this other stuff. And now, this is what we still want you to work on as well."
Yeah, I love that approach too, to really help that player gain the confidence that they need in that situation, and how you guys watch film together and kind of talk through it, and showing them that clip of them making that shot contested. I'm sure that gets them thinking, "Hey, I can do this," and that's a really positive approach to it. And one of the things I wanted to talk about with you is actually shooting, so it's a good segue. I know your pinned tweet. It's a scroll of a lot of shooting drills and a lot of great stuff. And, I've seen some of the drills you put out there. You had a great transition drill that you put out there. You have great shooting drills that you put out there. There's stuff that I steal from you myself. So I appreciate what you share. And I wanted to talk about shooting, and what are some of the things that you like to do, some of the drills that you like to do with players, at the college level that work well for you?
Yeah, so like you said, one of my favorite ones is my conditioning threes. Being able to shoot one with pressure, but also when you're tired. I don't know how I came up with it, but I created it in the summer, and I'm like, I actually like this. I'm going to take it wherever I go because the players get frustrated. I'm like, yes, it's a good shooting drill. Um, but something that gets them moving kind of up and down the court sometimes when they're fatigued. And I try to get that fourth quarter mentality of, okay, game's on the line, or we're fourth quarter, 2 minutes. How are your legs? Are you still in rhythm? Because that's something I've learned from clinics back in the spring, watching other coaches talk about. The game's going to break your rhythm. How do you find it back as a shooter? So anything that's with conditioning, I like to put pressure on it. So sometimes we just do a simple 5 spot. I'll tell them they have to make 8 or 10, and then after that, make like their eighth make, they have to make two in a row before they move on to the next spot. So again, kind of creating that mental pressure with them shooting. Like I said, I'll also add different type of read shootings, and it could be simple as cutting from the top to the corner, like we do in our zone offense. Nothing fancy about it, but again, repping that cut, making sure they're getting their footwork where they need to get to, and they're in a position to be ready to catch and shoot. Um, what else? Yeah, I mean, I try to do a little bit more conditioning within it. I think I call it Reggie Miller, but I think other people might have a different name for it. We go, I believe, 2 minutes. I let them pick their 4 spots. Uh, if they make it, they touch half court. If they miss it, they're touching the opposite free throw line. Or if you want to make them touch the opposite baseline, you can. And they go from that same spot for 2 minutes. Some will have them go to the next spot after that 2 minutes. I'll make them shoot 2 free throws. They have to make 2 free throws, and then they go on. That's like their rest. And then they go on to the next spot. 2 free throws in between next spot. I just liked the tweet from Anthony Pugh, who I follow for clockwork training and whatnot. He calls it 15-minute shooting, but it's like 5 minutes from corner to corner three. And then there's no break in between. So after that 5 minutes, you're going wing to wing three for 5 minutes, and then it's top of the key three for 5 minutes back and forth. And I'm like, I like that. I don't know if my players would like that, but I'm like, I kind of like that idea. I might throw, instead of no break, free throws in between for maybe like a minute and then go wing to wing, but just something that gets them kind of fatigued, that mentality of shooting, because shooting, as much as it is mechanical, is also mental.
Yeah, 100%. And love the drills that you're sharing, with that conditioning aspect. It's game speed, it's game shots, and they're going to be fatigued. They're going to be sprinting down the court in the game and catching and shooting. And those are all great drills, including the one you shared from Anthony Pugh there at the end as well. And I wanted to ask you, as you go through the season, I know there's an aspect of fatigue, and you're playing back-to-back games, and I know things might be a little bit different with this particular season this year, but just thinking about a typical season, and want to ask, how do you balance those physical shooting drills where, players are kind of getting in the conditioning aspect with some of the volume shooting drills? And do you have a theory on, how much is too much of one versus the other, or what you prefer, as a player development coach?
Right. So, for example, just given like the week that we've had right now, we play Friday, we play Saturday, we actually practice Sunday. It's kind of our cleanup practice. We'll practice Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday we're off. And then Thursday is kind of like we'll do a band workout to get a recovery in, and then it's kind of more so touching up on things before that Friday game. So Sunday, I will actually do more of a kind of a workout after practice with any of the players that want to play, that want to. We'll add a little bit of read shooting, not as heavy conditioning because we just came off back-to-back games, but still some conditioning within it, whether we keep it in the half-court setting or just sideline to sideline. Getting mostly it's like an hour. Not typically anything on Monday. Tuesday, I don't usually do anything. Wednesday is their off day. And then Thursday is when I work with some of the players after practice before we actually get ready for a game. And that's more of just reps, just straight reps, whether it's in our offense or just going around getting as many reps as possible, because volleyball comes in after us around like 6. So we only have an hour in between. So that I typically go heavy on Sunday and then lighter on Thursday before the game. If we were going like a normal schedule, which would be we would play Wednesday, play Saturday, I would typically, depending on how many players wanted to work out before or after, I would go heavy on Monday, maybe like mild on Thursday since we played that Wednesday. And then if anyone wanted to work out for some reason the day before a game, we'd keep it a little bit lighter. Again, getting more reps up, if anything else, the day before game.
So I want to ask, we've talked about the IQ aspect of player development, and then the physical in the sense of shooting. And I know at the college level, there's probably some type of strength and conditioning coach, but just want to ask a general question about that in terms of player development, the physical aspect of it, whether it's players you work with on your own or players within the college. How important is that strength aspect to player development, and how often are they lifting, in college during the season?
Oh, it's so important. It's like number one in a sense. There's also injury prevention. And we actually we had two strength and conditioning coaches during the fall. They worked with Ignition, so they actually were able to work with us. They did not come back this after winter break, so it's actually on us as coaches to do our strength and conditioning program. But in the season right now, we lift Sunday, so again we're lifting the day after a game. We lift Tuesdays, and then we'll do a light band workout on Thursday. So we're getting about essentially 3 days of lifting in a week on top of playing on Friday and Saturday. Now the Sunday and Tuesday lifting are very explosiveness. We'll vary it. I think Sundays are more of our upper body. We'll have maybe one station that has a lower body exercise. That's more of our upper body, whereas Tuesdays are our lower body since we have Wednesday off. But like you said, it's so important. It's helped our kids with injury prevention. It's also helped with their explosiveness. Like I said, we want to play fast. We're up and down in transition. We're a dribble drive team, so we're looking to get physical and attack the basket and be that explosive type team. So, we didn't want to do everything in the fall and then all of a sudden come season, we're like, it's too much for our kids. Our kids actually, they embrace it. They work really hard in the weight room because they know that it's beneficial to them come game day. So, I get at the high school level, you don't have those type of resources, but at least trying to do something where it's still kind of, whether it's light or not, it helps, again, injury prevention, but also maintaining the strength and explosiveness that you built in the earlier years.
Well, dribble drive is right up my alley, so I might have to have you join me again and talk dribble drive down the road at some
Oh,
point.
you might have to teach me some stuff because this is my first year coaching dribble drive. So, I'm still learning as I ran a Princeton offense at the high school level the last 2 years. So I was like all Princeton when I came into Wilmington. I'm like, oh, dribble drive. Yeah, I've never run that before. I'm learning as I'm going, so I might have to pick up some stuff from you.
That sounds great to me. I think you'll like it the more you see it, the more you use it, and I think there are some similarities. Obviously, some differences too, but you'll see some similarities. I wanted to ask you, as we were talking about the physical aspect of the game, just one other topic in terms of the player development piece, and that's finishing. You know, I know that part of that is building the strength in players and taking the contact. And so I just wanted to hear from your perspective, what are some of the things that you like to do with players in terms of finishing? And then I have a follow-up question that I'm gonna ask just about types of finishes. But I guess the first thing is, what do you like to do in terms of finishing with players?
So, if it's in our warm up breakdowns, I'll have a pad, and I will actually hit them with the pad. I will make them hit me because I want them to initiate the contact. I think I do a disservice when I'm doing all the contact, and I get a little mechanical whistle now because of this whole COVID thing. So we can hit that. We get on them about I'm not hitting you. You have to hit me. We pressure them to see if anyone can knock me down. And that's the one thing nice about college too is we have the charge circle. So we give them different scenarios. Like if I'm standing inside the charge circle, you better be running me over and initiating the contact. If I'm outside, okay, what's your secondary move? So I'll have a pad with that. When we came back in January, we did 2 weeks of 2-a-days where like the morning was our skill session and we did some one-on-one stuff where I think some coaches have done this before. There's various names for it. I know I've picked it up as like blind 1v1 where they have the ball on the back of their defender. They take it and then you're making that type of read. We've done hip one-on-one with someone standing literally shoulder to shoulder, working on that veer off. Help side one-on-one where, you have one on the baseline, one on the ball side block, defender touches the opposite block while the offensive player dribbles to the elbow, and then you're working on reading one-on-one help. We've done those different things to work on taking contact, but also reading contact, because what I've learned coaching women's basketball, whether it be at the high school or college level, there's some that don't like contact. So how do we make them comfortable with contact?
I think that's basketball in general, coach. I've been on both sides of it, and I feel like there's some players that like it, and some players you got to teach to love it, and it takes a little bit of work. Before we get into those secondary moves, which is something I want to ask about, I want to follow up on the 1v1 finishing drills. Is that something that you work on in those workouts, the small group workouts, or do you incorporate some aspects of that into your practices as well?
So we've done both. We've done more so it was more towards our small group workouts. Now we have done practices where we've actually split, and we've done our bigs doing one-on-one on one end and our guards on the other end doing one-on-one. And we've done it where if we do it like that in practice, I'll have the guards and we'll do paint one-on-one. So I limit the offensive player to only like 2 or 3 dribbles, and they have to stay within the paint. And it also works on our defense as well, and how we want to defend of keeping the ball in front of us and not getting beat, working on our angles. We've done, I call it Alabama one-on-one because I think I stole it from Alabama men's basketball, of tossing it out to the wing, and the defender has to touch the opposite block and then close out. So working on long closeouts and then reading as an offensive player, those type of closeouts and finishing. So we've done it both ways of keeping it in small groups, but also incorporating in practices based on positions.
So thinking about those secondary moves, is there a specific, I know it can be different from player to player, but do you guys have certain things that you teach within your program that you expect players should be able to do, whether it's a Euro step, or I don't know, people call it the rondo now, where you fake one way and go back the other. There's a lot of different names, I guess, for all these moves, but are there specific moves that you actually teach within your program? And obviously, there are players that kind of go outside of that finishing skill set as well.
Oh yeah, I will say there's one finish that I think everyone needs to be able to do, and we've harped it on our players 1 through 5. Is an extended finish. I've seen too many players, even at the Division I level, get their layup blocked because they go straight up like a normal layup that you're taught in grade school, and they're not keeping it away from the defender. Like the defender's going straight up to block your shot, and you end up shooting it right into their hands. When you're going against length, which especially when we have, like, our tallest player, I think, is 6 foot. We really don't have a true center. So we've taught our kids, when you go up against length, to use an extended finish. And I got happy because one of our 5'4" guards used one and got an and one because she kept it away from the defender out towards the backboard and was able to make the layup. So we've harped on extended finishes, whether it's inside, wrong foot, or just a normal extended finish. There might be different. I know people have called it like a body bump or anything. I've used veer as the term. Again, initiating the contact and being able to veer your defender off their line. Euro, I've taught certain players. It all depends on how good they are playing off 1 foot. Because we have players that aren't comfortable playing off 1 foot, so depends on them. I like a quick spin finish, especially if you get cut off, being able to really counter a defender cutting you off. And then, like you said, the rondo. I know people call it a stride stop too. I love that move. I think you got to be able to play off your pivot, but it gives you so many different. I guess I've seen different variations of it as well. Whether you can take a shot, you can step through same side, you can fake the step through and spin. So being able to have that combination where you can have 4 different finishes off one pivot is amazing, and we try to teach our players that.
Just want to ask one last question when it comes to finishing, and that's finishing off of 2 feet. A lot of clips out there with Villanova under Jay Wright and how great they are getting into the paint, getting on 2 feet, and then making decisions and kind of slowing things down and creating off that or using ball fakes and whatnot. So how much of an emphasis is that for your program? Is that something that, you like to see players do? And then, also just thinking about even, having to recruit players from high school to college. And is that something that you look for in a player as you're looking for them to come into your program?
Yeah, absolutely. I look at it both ways. I like to see if they can still finish off 1 foot, but also 2 feet. And like you said, we've taught a couple of our small guards too, because we've been teaching floaters as well. There's times that you have to use a 1 foot, but there's more times than not, there's better times to use a 2 foot because you're more balanced. It prevents you from basically committing a charge. Your momentum kind of slows down. You're able to go straight up and down. When we look at recruiting, I do look at players that can finish a variety of ways, but I do like to see if they can play off 2 feet because it opens up the game for them. If they're able to come to a stop or they're able to use various pivots when they're stuck, it makes my eyes like widen up. I'm like, okay, this kid can play in a variety of ways. But yeah, we look at it, and at least for me personally, in a perspective of, I look at more so 2 feet, but I like to see if they could also play off 1 foot too.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing your perspective on that, as well as really all the topics we've talked about today. I feel like I could keep ping ponging with you and asking questions. We could be here for hours because just a lot of great input. And I really appreciate your perspective, not only here, but what you share on social media as well. And I want to ask, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this question, different from player development, but I can sense it even when you're talking the game with me, that enthusiasm. You have this infectious enthusiasm, and I see the clips that you share out on Twitter. That excitement that you have on the bench and the passion, and I can imagine it must be a lot of fun for the players who have a chance to play with you as their coach and have that see that enthusiasm. But where does that come from? Is that something that you've always had as a player? That passion for the game of basketball?
Yeah, I think I had it as a player, but I gotta give a shout out to Coach Jamar Mosley from Purcell Marion High School. That's actually the first high school I coached as an assistant coach. And if you think I'm enthusiastic, this guy is up and down on the floor and everything like that. But when I got to work under him, he really allowed me to be myself. Because I think because I'm 28, so when I was working with him, I think I was 25. Still kind of a younger coach. I wasn't sure. You see all these different things of, well, coaches can't show this too much emotion, or they can't do this and everything like that. And I'm like, I don't know who I need to be. And when I saw him, I'm like, okay, I can, he seems comfortable in who he is. So then when I transitioned to coaching Division 1 high school in the next year, when I was a head JV coach, I just got to be myself, and no one told me differently. The best compliment I got last year at Mercer McCully High School from a senior parent was, "You wear your enthusiasm on your sleeve." And that made me feel so good about myself, because I mean, I love basketball. It's done wonders for my life, and I think I wanted to be able to show that passion with coaching. Now there's moments, but I think you got to make it fun. I always consider myself kind of like a Kim Mulkey when I do give a floor slap sometimes. Um, but no, I had it as a player, and it really fully came out as a coach, being able to work with someone who was just as enthusiastic and passionate about the same vision that we had for our players. But yeah, I'm happy you brought that up, because it makes me feel a little bit good. I'm like, okay, I fist bump a lot. I'll say that. That's my go-to. I'll fist pump a lot. I've gotten a kick. I don't know if you saw that video. I did post a video. Like, I was like leaning down with a 3-point shot, and she made it, and I just like kicked my foot out and pumped it. I'm like, I don't know where this comes out of. Like, I don't plan or anything. It's just natural.
Well, I love it, Coach, and as I would say, be you, and I love what I see, and I'm sure your players do as well. It's a lot of fun, and that enthusiasm for the game. You're having fun out there, so I hope you always stay that way and bring that with you wherever you go. I think it's going to be great, and the players are going to be very fortunate to play for a coach who has that enthusiasm as well.
Well, thank you, Coach. I truly appreciate that.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining me tonight. I hope we can do this again down the road. I had a lot of fun talking hoops with you, and hopefully we can again.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.